It's high noon somewhere in the world. I'm just watching chat right here. I'm having a blast. Like Nightbot. I mean, I love the Nightbot automated moderation service sort of thing, but at times it's like super aggressive. I'm sorry, Ultifix. It's like it's better than having a chat full of spammers. But anyways. Yeah, right. So, as you might have seen, today's stream title is shit. What is it? What to consider when buying or making a 3D printer. So, the idea with this one is essentially, I mean, if you don't need like the image, you can just listen to it as a podcast. I want to go through first of all what you should. Crap, that's the stream title. I want to go through, all the things you should just have a look at and consider when, picking a 3D printer to buy, to make, to build, to improve on, what your needs are going to be, how those match with the different options. I'm not actually going to recommend a single 3D printer because let's be honest, there is no single 3D printer who's, that's just super, super awesome for everyone. That's the perfect machine. It just doesn't exist. I mean, it's never going to exist because there are always going to be machines that differ in like the options you're going to get, in like the performance you're going to get, in all those things. We're going to get into those. So the first part, like I have no idea how long this is going to take. I have no idea how well this is going to work out. So stick with me here. The first part is going to be just me sort of trying to discuss what you should be looking for particular applications, and then the second part, maybe we can get a few chat live Q&A things going, and I adjusted the Patreon hangout, and I've had someone ask, hey, what would be the best printer to assemble as like a group of 20 or 30 people, and maybe we can get into that in a bit. Right. As always, I can only comment on printers that I have actually used and ideally reviewed, so something like the ANET A8 I can't comment on because I haven't seen, touched, or used that machine yet. Anyways, let's start out. Basics. So, the first thing you sort of should be looking into is, who are you? Where are you on the scale of, I'm a complete tinkerer, I sort of want to do everything myself, to I need a machine that works because I'm going to be resting my business on the shoulders of that 3D printer. There is a very long and fluent scale between those 2 points. So hardcore tinkerer, programming your firmware yourself, making mods there, ideally designing your own PCBs and stuff. I like the maker, the common maker more or less, educators, like interesting university users, and then the professional who actually print stuff for a living with those machines. So somebody's asking, when does it start in chat? Refresh the page, by the way, if you don't have the stream going, then what's even the point of saying it? Right, where are you on that scale? And that is gonna influence a lot about your printer decisions. So just the 4 machines I have today, because I could bring the Loadspot Mini out there as well, but it didn't fit on the table physically. So we have the Tiny Boy, aka the Fabricator Mini. That is a 150 euro, 8x8 centimeter, super basic, super Chinese machine. We have the Printable Play, $400, 10 by 10 by, 10 tall or 12 centimeters tall. $400 US made. We have the Prusa i3 Mark II, 250 by 200 by 200, fully featured machine, and we have the Markforged Mark II Enterprise, which is a $13,500 3D printer, which prints nylon and carbon fiber and all those things. And all those machines, all these machines, the full price range, they each have their application. They each have their sweet spot where you should be using them. So, first thing to realize, where are you on that scale? And that's going to come into play in a minute. Then, how much are you actually going to use the machine? So, if you are like a consumer, someone who would be looking at Kickstarter and be going, hey, like, $200 for a 3D printer, yeah, I could buy one of those. someone who bought the Maki box, someone who bought the Tico. If you're one of those people, then you're probably not going to be using it that much. You're not going to be using it 24/7. My two Prusa Mark IIs, they've been printing nearly 24/7 for the last weeks, just testing filaments and trying to, get a rating for each of them. They've been super reliable. If you don't need that, then there are other options. What materials are you going to print? So, like these two are, PLA and maybe PET machines. This one does basically everything, the Prusa Mark II heated bed and the all-metal hot end. And the Mark Forged, on the other hand, is again limited to just nylon-based materials. So that's something that's going to be coming into play as well. So let's sort of start out on how long is the stream going to be? So maybe an hour or so? I don't know. Let's see. Let's see how well this works out. Let's go through that scale of who you are and what printer you should be looking into. So starting like on the one extreme, on the hardcore maker, and I guess a lot of you are in that corner, in the I want to do everything myself, and that's the corner where I keep seeing the comments like, but why don't you buy an ANET A8, or why don't you buy a TiVo Tarantula, or why don't you buy Chinese cheap printer X? Because you're looking at features, you're looking at, okay, for $200 on AliExpress, I can get a heated bed, I can get a V6 clone, I can get an LCD, I can get a decent build volume, a metal frame maybe even, and ticks all the boxes, does everything you want. However, those machines do have a few downsides. Again, if you're a maker, if you're hardcore do-it-yourselfer, they're not going to matter too much. First of all, if you're buying from China, you're not going to get customer support. It's just not going to happen unless you're buying from one of these super reputable manufacturers, and at that point you do also pay a premium, at which point you could just buy a brand name local machine. If you buy from China, you are basically saying, hey, or if you're buying from someone, let's not call out China particularly. If you're buying from a cloner, a copier, someone who's just selling i3 kits or something else like that on eBay or on AliExpress or somewhere else, you're essentially saying, okay, I don't value original innovation. I just want the parts, I just want the metal parts or the electronics and stuff, and build my own thing. So that's one of the reasons why the Prusa kit from the Czech Republic is so expensive, because they have about 50 people who are working on customer support, who are working on software support, on integrating the features, and not just developing them. I realized like the mesh bed leveling and what else? The multi-filament extruder they're now producing. They aren't original work of the Prusa guys, but they're the ones who are making it work. And of course, since they're releasing that as open source, everyone else can copy that. And that's not something you're funding if you're buying from just a third party who's simply cloning those things. So if you buy something from China, you do have to be comfortable with the stuff you're working with. I think Angus from Maker's Muse, he's been commenting on the TiVo Tarantula, on that particular one, I think it was, and don't quote me on this, but his comments were something like, okay, if you buy this machine, you do get the basic stuff, but the build manual doesn't get you to a finished machine. The build manual is not complete or good enough to actually produce a finished machine. So he had to rely on forums and on community support to even get his machine up and working. If you're happy with doing that, then go for it. The other thing, I guess we should go into that as well. Pricing, like if you buy a $200 machine from China, you do have to keep that in mind. You're not paying for customer support, you're not paying for original development. You are at times not even paying for CE, FCC conformity and certification there. You're also not paying for import tax. Yet you are going to have to tack that on if it gets caught by imports. That's going to be 20% extra. And if you're unlucky, and if you can't really discuss with the imports guys as well, you might not even get the machine into your country, because if it's like a semi-completed machine, or if it's just a power supply or something, it's going to need that FCC or CE badge. And ideally like the paper declaration as well. So that's going to be something to consider there. Again, cheap machine, maker, totally fine. Now the other bracket of like the soft maker, the DIY person who may not be too comfortable just figuring out everything by themselves. And the other thing is also you might value your time, because the time you're going to spend on building one of the cheaper kits, if you enjoy that, if your time is like not worth that much, go for it, do it. But if you like want a faster build, or if you just don't want to spend the time on just figuring things out afterwards, then a bit more expensive machine could be a good choice for you. Right, educator. There is a distinct bracket for like education and machines to be used in classrooms. MakerBot has, seen that potential. They are going hard for it. There are also other machines, like a German-made one. What is it? Tinker Lab. I don't know. Essentially, they're selling an €8,500 printer that has activated carbon filter, that has a closed door on the front, that has an educational package that comes with it. And for the people buying it, and I guarantee you there will be schools buying that, for them it's worth it. For them it's worth paying those €8,500 if you just get the machine that is like certified. Okay, it's not going to release any fumes. It has that filter in there. You get the entire script for your lessons, and you get everything of those in there, and that's worth it for them. Right now, why do machines like the Markforged exist? Or why do machines like the Ultimaker 3 exist, which arguably is an expensive machine? It's Ultimaker 3 dual extrusion, €3,500 for the standard model. That is solidly in a premium price range. Now, those machines give you, especially the Markforged, the Markforged does it, the Ultimaker does it, MakerBot does it as well. They give you an ecosystem. They give you the filaments, they give you the printer, obviously, they give you the software to run it, and they give you customer support all from one hand. And you bet your ass that is worth something to someone who relies on these machines to work. So just by having all those components from a single controlled source, so filaments, machine, print profiles, software right there, if you have all those from one source, you are going to be, you might not be able to just rely on that too hard and say it's always going to work. But the point is, if something doesn't work, you have a single person, a single institution, company, whatever to blame, and they are the ones who are going to fix it. It's not like messing around with, okay, was it the filament's fault? Was it the machine's fault? Was it like the software's fault messing up? No, there is one single company that is responsible for all of those. So there is the justification for that. Now, once you move past that, past just the users, what sort of features should you be looking into? Because there is a wide range of just tick box features essentially on a 3D printer. One of the most important ones, which the Fabricator Mini and the Fischer Technic machine, which I just released the review of today, lack, is a part cooling fan. So that's the fan right here on the Play, and the fan right here on the Prusa i3 Mark II on the original one. Those blow cold air over your printed part, and essentially that is super important for anything that's PLA. If you watch the Fischer Technic video, you're going to be able to see the just the sort of artifacts you're going to get from not having a part cooling fan. That is something I'd expect from every 3D printer that is supposed to print PLA. Then, what's next? Arthur Wolf, hi Arthur by the way, commented auto leveling. Yes, auto leveling is a feature that is maybe not mandatory these days, but is really appreciated by me. Some people don't like it, I get that. The point is, these three machines do it right. So the Tiny Boy auto leveling, if you don't know what it is essentially it measures a few spots on your bed. Like the Prusa does 9, the Plagius does 3, and then adjusts the nozzle accordingly. So if you have a slanted bed like that, the nozzle doesn't move into the bed, it moves along that contour. And the newer ones also compensate for skew and not just for like a misalignment. That essentially makes bed adjustment, like adjusting your physical print bed with little screws in the corners, makes that completely unnecessary. And it works. It really works well too. However, on smaller printers like this one, you don't get auto leveling. You don't need it, because the difference between one corner of the bed and the other is going to be so minuscule, so tiny, that you sort of you don't need it. Even if you do get like a 0.5% tilt on that, it's not going to matter. Then the other end of the spectrum is the Markforged machine, which also doesn't have auto leveling, but this one is using that looks like 1/4 inch. That one's using a 1/4 inch slab of aluminum and a very robust, the bed undercarriage, which is like 1/2 inch thick, half an inch of aluminum. That's not going to go out of alignment. That's on the very well constructed side. Where you need, or at least you adjust it once and then it's set. Where you need auto leveling is machines that aren't that well constructed and have like a mid-size build volume. So like on the Play, yes, this one is constructed like a beast, but there are no adjustment points on the bed anywhere. It's just bolted down, and there's a sensor in here, it probes the bed, and that's that. So you're never going to have to touch that. The Prusa, isn't really the most stable machine, but it compensates for that in software. And so once you set it down, once you let it run its auto calibration, its bed measuring cycle, at that point you're pretty much done. So there's no need to like over-engineer parts and make it more rigid, heavier, more expensive than they need to. Right, materials. What materials do you want to print? So essentially these print PLA only. They have a regular hot end. This one has like a V6 clone. They have regular hot ends, good to about 250 degrees, so that's enough for PLA and PET. Maybe if you can get it to stick to the bed. The Mark II uses a genuine V6 hot end and a heated bed, which means you can print basically all the materials out there. Having that V6 hot end in there not only means that you have a hot end that is, at least by me, considered very reliable and like the top of the notch platform right now, but it also means that you get access to like, replaceable nozzles, so you can print carbon fiber composites and that sort of stuff, or metal filaments, which, shit. What the heck? OBS keeps freezing up. I have no idea what's happening there. So this stream is going to be re-uploaded, because once I run into that issue, yeah, typically the YouTube recording doesn't work either. Right, I was talking about materials. I was talking about the V6 hot end. So this one has a V6 clone. This one has the genuine genuine V6 in here. Having that in here essentially means that you can not only rely on it working for most materials, but you can also swap in a different nozzle. So you can print metal-filled filaments, you can print carbon-filled filaments, all that sort of stuff. And like the genuine one goes up to 300 degrees Celsius. You can upgrade that even further if you wanted to. But yeah, that's one of the advantages there. Also, heated bed means you can print stuff like ABS, like ASA, PET to a certain extent needs a heated bed. But also having that heated bed in here is great for PLA, because it makes printing easier. You're not going to have to worry about blue tape pulling off the subframe or the bed surface. You're not going to have to worry about stuff warping too much, because the extra heat from the bed just makes it, keeps your printed part at a higher temperature and keeps it from warping. Yeah, someone's asking about silicone type materials. That is actually a great question. So yeah, one of the things you should also be looking out for, which again, the Chinese machines don't do particularly well that often because their extruders are very open, is printing flexible materials. If you want to do that, if you want to print anything that is soft and flexible, you should look for an extruder that is well constrained. Like a Bowden, typically not a good idea. The Play, I don't think, does very well in that regard either. The Prusa is okay. So filaments that are flexible, this is a Filaflex as far as I know. Filaments that are flexible just depend on the type of extruder that's in there. And if in doubt, ask the manufacturer, as always. Silicone type materials are always going to be something that requires a bit of modification. If you want to get into like paste extrusion, which essentially is just that, check out RichRap. I don't know if he's got a real domain yet, but just Google RichRap. He's got a few paste extruders on his blog, which you can freely copy. He's releasing his stuff as Creative Commons, some sort of open source, and it's stuff he's trying out and working for him. It's stuff that's tested by him. So yeah, bed surfaces, blue tape, PEI, put anything on top. So the bed surface is like the last bit you should be looking into. Typically, like the cheaper machines use blue tape. This one, the Play and the Mini Fabricator, just use blue tape on the bed because they're unheated, and blue tape kind of works well for unheated beds, but something like the PEI surface on the Prusa i3 Mark II on the original one, or any other surface that is like specifically made for a 3D printer bed is going to be a huge step up from just the regular blue tape. Uhu stick also works sort of well, yeah. Do I recommend PEI? Yes, I do. It's hard to get, but it's worth it. Okay, comfort features. That's something that, again, good selection of variety, a good variety of selections. That's what I was going to say. So, comfort features, which I consider, auto leveling sort of is a comfort feature, but things like the LCD screen on the Mark II, the SD slot on the Mark II, the Play also has an SD slot, but you need to control that from a laptop or from a computer still. And the Markforged machine actually has Wi-Fi and a touchscreen and super, it's a super integrated system. So, starting from the lowest end, this one you're just gonna have to plug into USB. It's actually got a fixed USB cord attached to it. That's plugged in somewhere on the bottom here. Yeah, that's the angle connector. That's always going to require either a Raspberry Pi that you set up, which again, hardcore maker, not a problem usually, or a laptop that you dedicate to 3D printing, ideally with Windows updates turned off and nothing else running on it, because you're typically not going to be using it while it's next to your 3D printer. Something like the Mark II with the SD slot, you pop your, does it have an SD slot card in here? Yep. You pop your print onto the SD card, you head over here, you start it from the LCD screen, and that's it. The printer does the rest itself. So, stuttering? Hopefully not. That's that. And of course the Markforged does Wi-Fi, so you don't even have to grab an SD card, run back and forth from your printer to the from your computer to the printer. You just send the file from the Eiger slicer, from the cloud-based slicer to your printer directly, and you're good on that front. Smooth, perfect. Right, features. What else? So, I guess on the higher end features, like on the Markforged, we're seeing the nice acrylic front panel. Can I open it from this side? Yeah, sort of. You can sort of see it moving there. This is a closed build volume. The AIO Robotics, which I'm going to review next week, also has that enclosed build volume, which you're not supposed to use for 3D printing, just for scanning. The big advantage of that is not that, well, to a certain extent too, is not that you'd get the closed volume, which heats up and obviously is better for ABS, but you also get a noise reduction. And that's something I sort of want to quickly talk about, because there are huge issues there are huge differences between the noise level of 3D printers. So, you know, if you watch my 3D printer reviews, you're always going to see, or at least on the more recent ones, you're always going to see me using that decibel meter and just showing you how loud the machine is. And, you know, on the one side, sure, if you're putting it in a workshop, in the basement room or something, you're typically not going to hear it. But the louder printers actually, you know, Germany, we have concrete ceilings typically and brick walls, which should be pretty good for like, you know, audio canceling. Most of these machines you don't hear, but there are some that are so loud you can hear in the entire house because like the frame is resonating or the stepper motors are super loud or just something like that. Again, nothing you will be able to figure out before buying it most of the time, but just something to look out for if you want to use a 3D printer in a classroom or, you know, in some sort of an environment, work environment, where you have people next to the machine. These things are tolerable, hard words, to a certain extent, but some of them are just too loud. Yeah, wooden houses. Okay, plug and play versus tune yourself. Okay, that's a good point to get into. So, plug and play versus tune yourself. That is again on that entire slope of, you know, hardcore maker to fully professional user, and it's also on the slope from a Chinese clone import machine to buying an Ultimaker or a Markforged machine. So typically something like the cheaper machines, PrinterBot I think has improved on that as well. They've been pretty bad at that in the beginning. Is how much I should actually put my phone on airplane mode. Come on. Right, so that's something that a lot of machines have improved on, and it's something that I've been criticizing a lot because I think it's one of the biggest factors in how good of an experience you're going to have with a new 3D printer is how much work has the manufacturer put into tuning slicer profiles and tuning, you know, slicer software profiles for their machine. How much work have they put into tuning the firmware to work with the hardware they're supplying? So that's something like a generic i3 kit is typically not going to be too great at. They're typically just going to go, hey, okay, this is like a standard Prusa i3 sort of style machine. And yeah, you know, just open up Cura and select the i3 and it's going to work. And it's going to work, but it's not going to work well. That's the point. So like printers like the, actually I don't know how much, you know, how well PrinterBot is doing on that front. But I know that the Loadspot machines, the Loadspot Mini, the Taz, they're doing awesome. They're providing you with a custom version of Cura that just has all the profiles for all the materials and layer heights and infills all laid out. So it's literally just plug and play. You select your profile, you put in the material, and it just works. The Prusa i3 is the same. They're just supplying you with a custom version of Slick3R, where you've got all the materials already pre-tuned. So it's literally just, you know, grab the machines, you pick a material, pick any material, and you're good to go. So what you're typically going to get on the lower end machines is just a single print profile. So say 0.2 millimeter layer height, PLA only, one infill, and everything else you want to deviate from that, you're going to have to change yourself and tune in yourself. So that is something, I mean, that is something you can very easily test before buying a machine, because you will need those profiles available publicly. So if you go to any manufacturer's website and just head over to downloads or support or something like that and look for print profiles, you can try those out with the open source softwares, typically for free, and just see how much variety they give you, and if all the different profiles are included for the types of materials you want to print. Right, what else? Kit versus assembled machine. So this was an assembled one, this was a kit. This is the assembled Prusa, but I've had the assembled and kit versions both, and the Markforged obviously, you know, comes ready to print out of the box. Kit versus assembled machine. So printer bots actually cost the same, whether you buy them assembled or as a kit. The Prusa costs a bit less if you buy it as a kit. So the idea with the printer bots is, Brook is saying, okay, it doesn't matter whether we spend the time on assembling these ourselves, because these are really simple to assemble, or whether we spend the time on providing customer support to people who struggle with the assembly. They're saying that's working out to about the same effort for them. So they're selling it for the same price. Prusa, on the other hand, is saying, okay, the assembly should be something everyone can do. It's a bit more involved than the play actually, but they're saying, okay, we're going to save the time with we're going to save the time with actually assembling it. We're going to save on shipping, because this thing ships in a huge box, because it's look at the volume of it. It needs a lot of volume. This one just flat packs essentially. That's something that they're saying, but again, I didn't mention this yet, but the idea behind kit versus assembled machine, and it's not universal, but the way I see it is, if you want to learn about these machines, if you see them as a hobby, if you want to see them as something that's educational for you, for your kids, for whoever else, get the kit. Get the printer kit. Don't go for the assembled one if you have the choice, but go for a kit that, again, you can usually find the instructions online. Have a look at them, have a look at how far you think you're going to get with those type of instructions. Something like the play, that thing builds in 4 or 5 hours. If you want to take your time, it's like one afternoon. It's fun to build. There are so many pre-made parts, it just, everything snaps together. The Mark II is a bit more involved, but it's still like a sort of educational thing if you want to build it yourself. So, if you want to learn about these machines, if you have the time to build them, because like I said, it's going to be an afternoon or a full day with the Mark II, then definitely go for the kit. However, if you want to go for a kit of a off-brand generic machine, that's going to be probably something that's going to be more involved, more like 2 or 3 days. You're going to have to spend on not only assembling it, but then also like getting it to work, fixing little things and, tuning it in and that sort of stuff. The fully assembled machines make sense if you just want something to print. If, again, you're not using the 3D printer as a hobby, but if you're using it as a tool. So that is interesting. I've just had those questions in the Patreon Hangout. The assembled machines are just something if you want to use these as a tool. If you buy like a cordless drill, you're not going to buy that as a kit, as a DIY thing. I guess it's sort of the same thing with like desktop computers. If you want to see the computer as like either if you want to save some cash, or if you want to see them as a hobby, then you might as well just buy all the parts and assemble them yourself, which is a lot less involved than building a 3D printer actually. And versus just buying the ready-made gaming tower. That's sort of the same thing, the same idea there. Okay, kit versus assembled machine. I think that should be pretty well covered. And one last note on mechanics versus on the mechanics of a printer. Are there any things that are better than others? And I know I'm repeating myself here. I keep pointing this out again and again. The mechanics of a 3D printer don't determine how well it performs. So it doesn't matter whether you have a Core XY or a Delta or the classic stacked XZ or something else. Do I have any other setup? I don't think so. Yeah, I have like the Ultimaker style gantry. It totally doesn't matter. Core XY is not a kinematics platform that is in any way superior to the classic X with a motor, Y with a motor, and Z with a motor. It totally does not matter. What does matter is how well those things are built. If your 3D printer is going to use cheap bearings, cheap linear bearings, is going to use like thin rails that are going to make everything wobbly, if they use belts that aren't properly tensioned, then you're going to have a bad experience, no matter whether it's a classic kinematics platform or a Core XY or anything else. And that's, by the way, the same between the Cartesian machines and I moved this one over here, the Delta machines, which have a completely different motion system to them. Deltas are a bit harder to get perfectly right, but they're not impossible to get perfect. And again, that's just something that's going to be up to the specific kit you're going to look into. Okay, podcast over. I think that was quite a bit of talking for me to do at 30 hours straight. Wow. Let's head into chat and look at what you guys are, inputting to this sort of discussion. Someone's asking about the BQ Prusa i3. Ever since the Mark II is out, it's like it's pointless recommending any other i3 in that point in that price range. So, yeah, Core XY buzzword. Now, the talk about Black Friday. We don't have Black Friday here. It's Germany. We just buy stuff at reasonable prices. Tools for assembling. Yeah, so that's also something that really differs from one machine to the other. So, are these Torx heads? Yeah, these are Torx heads. Tools for assembly. Typically, the better machines, or the brand name machines, I think the printable plate did supply all the tools more or less. So did the Prusa i3 Mark II. Typically, a 3D printer assembly is going to be Allen keys or hex wrenches or whatever else you want to call them. Is going to be maybe a few wrenches or spanners, or it's weird that all these regions have different names for things. So yeah, spanners essentially, and maybe a flathead and a Phillips screwdriver, and that's pretty much it. Typically, like I said, the better printers will supply you with all the tools. And more importantly, tools sort of don't matter because you don't need that many. Are going to supply you with the tools and the instructions to build your 3D printer. My opinion on the Minifabricator 2.0, this is the original one. I've not looked into the 2.0 yet, but will. Oh yeah, that's a good point. Will soon. Filament diameter, yeah. So, two filament diameters that are, well, there are only two essentially. There's 1.75 and 3 millimeter. I'm seeing if I've got a, yeah, there's a 1.75. I think I have another, that's a 3 millimeter. I think I have another 3 millimeter spool somewhere, but I sort of need something to show this off. Yeah, there we go. So there is some 3 millimeter PLA. Come on. And some, whatever, 1.75 millimeter carbon fiber. No, it's just a regular PLA as well. So essentially the difference is just the filament diameter. Now the smaller 1.75 millimeter filament is definitely the one that is much more popular these days. Simply because you need, or you don't need components that have that much torque for driving it. So typically I have the original extruder here somewhere, yeah. Typically what an extruder for 3 millimeter is going to look like is something like this. That's the old classic Wade's geared extruder, so that is like a 7-to-1 gearing ratio or something, because these motors don't have enough torque if you just put a little drive gear on them to push the 3 millimeter filament at a sufficient rate. So you put some sort of gearing on there, and it becomes this large extruder. I think the Ultimaker also has some sort of small gearing in there. 3 millimeter is just more effort to drive. The 1.75 millimeter is simpler. They are about the same in price. Typically, filament manufacturers that sell both sizes will sell them both at the same price. The one difference I'm seeing is, well, okay, technically, let's get that out of the way. Technically, 1.75 millimeter is better. Just from an engineering perspective, it heats faster in the hot end, it heats more consistently. You can print faster with it. It needs less force to drive. It should also work better in a Bowden because you're using more of the longitudinal movement instead of more, pressure to push it in. But 3mm keeps being something that I think some of the BCN machines use it, and most importantly, the Ultimaker uses it. I don't know why they didn't switch with the Ultimaker 3. No idea. They can both work. 1.75 is easier to make it work. 3mm can also get you great prints. That is just, again, not depending on the material, but depending on how well your machine is built. So the one thing where 3mm sort of exceeds is with flexible materials. If you want to print flexible materials like NinjaFlex, what do we have? Filaflex, any sort of material that is soft, then you're going to have an easier time with 3mm because it kinks less easily. It's just a thicker material. Yeah. People are asking about the E3D hotends, the Titan and the V6 Lite, by the way, it's called the Lite 6 as far as I know. Now, the Lite 6 and the V6 are like the classic, not exactly the classic, but like the two polar options more or less. So the V6, I could grab one of those. The V6 is your classic, more or less all metal hot end, which, if you use the right thermistor, if I could actually find it. If you use the right thermistor, if you use the right parts, it's going to get you up to like 400 or 500 degrees Celsius, which, essentially prints PEK and Ultem and PI and all these super high performance materials. A Teflon lined hot end like the Lite 6, which is actually, I call it a hybrid hot end because it still has that metal support structure, but uses a Teflon tube like this that goes all the way down into the heated part. Those go to like 250 degrees or something like that, and they will work most of the time, and they will potentially work better and more reliable with PLA. However, again, this is just anecdotal references. People keep saying, okay, the V6 jams with PLA. I haven't had a single issue with PLA and the V6s, and I've got a lot of them. And it's a cheaper approach. It's one that's easier to make work. You don't need the high precision heat break. They both work. If your temperature limit is 250 degrees Celsius, then you're fine either way. People are asking about 12 versus 24 volts. So if you guys were a Patreon over at patreon.com/toms3dp, I think that's also in the video description, you would have had the chance to join in on the discussion just an hour ago. Yeah, pretty much an hour ago on 12 versus 24 volts. So that is a question on building a 3D printer. It's not going to matter that much if you just buy a kit or buy a ready-made machine. They're going to select the right parts for you, but essentially using a 12 versus a 24 volt power supply in your kit or in your from scratch build. So 24 volt just gives you more voltage, obviously, but it gives you lower current operation. And the idea there is not that you have just the higher voltage to make things work better, but if you're using the same wattage for a heated bed, for example, if you use the classic 150 or 144 watt, the red PCB heaters, those come in at 12 amps at 12 volts. So, that is 1 ohm of resistance. If you use the same thing with 24 volts, you're going to need half the current for the same heating power, essentially. So you're going to get, you're going to have half the current through your wires, through your driver MOSFET, and through your, power supply and any connectors that are used there. So particularly at the driver board, at the connectors and the MOSFETs there, the power that is dissipated or wasted essentially in those connectors and in the MOSFET is to the current squared. So the 12 volt system is going to waste 4 times as much power in the MOSFET and in the connectors as your 24 volt system. And that essentially results in twice the temperature. So yeah, 24 volt is just much easier to use, both for the hot end heater and the heated bed, but particularly for the heated bed. Also 24 volt with the right drivers and the right motors makes your stepper drivers a bit easier to drive for the drivers, which can result in more torque or a quieter operation. So 24 volt preferred if you have the stream dying. What the? It works now? It's back. OBS, sort of weird. Sometimes it sort of drops out. I don't know why. I literally don't know why. Patreon. Check out the video description. Anyways, I don't know how much you guys got of that 12 versus 24. Essentially, the wasted power for 12 volt is 4 times as high in your connectors for wires and the connectors that go into your main board and to your power supply, and particularly the MOSFET that's driving the heated bed. Those losses are going to be 4 times as high at 12 volts versus 24. So that is just something that makes your life easier if you have a 24 volt power supply. Also, what I tacked onto that is 24 volt has the tendency of making stepper driver movements smoother, quieter, and with more torque. However, some combinations do exactly the opposite and make it much noisier. So 24 preferred if you have the choice. Windows app priority to server. I don't think there is a server priority. So if we actually head over here into OBS, set priority, it's at normal. Okay, let's just do above normal. Let's see if that helps. The weird thing is I've been having the same issues on the old laptop and the new one. However, on the old one, it's been like really bad. Up to a point where I couldn't get the stream back up at, I think it was the AIO unboxing, which is, I restarted the stream and then it was instantly gone again. No idea what was going on there. Print table, right. So as far as the, nope, not on Wi-Fi. As far as the platforms go that you would typically use as in the maker slot of things. Again, not looking into like Ultimakers or the LoadSpot machines, because those are, the LoadSpot Mini and the Taz are great machines. They're a great company too, but they are intended, at least if you look at the price, they are intended for brackets that use their 3D printers productively and don't just toy around with them, essentially. The Mark II or any sort of i3-like design really is great for like DIYers, because you can, again, like Chad is asking, the i3 is essentially a standard platform. So my Padawan actually got the iTopia i3, which is an MDF kit. Essentially, instead of the aluminum parts here, and the aluminum bed undercarriage and the threaded rod base, it's using MDF plates that get glued together. And it was sort of working, we were sort of going like, hey, yeah, we need a part cooling fan, we need this and that. But the idea is the i3 is a standard. So essentially what we did was just rip out the original extruder and hot end mount and replaced it with the Mark II parts. The great thing about the i3 or i3s is not that the printer itself is so great, but that this thing is a standards platform. So essentially these are mostly compatible with everything else that's out there. So no matter whether you have the genuine i3 Mark II, whether you have some sort of like i3 printed part kit, whether you have the iTopia i3, they all use like the same distance of ZX's rod and spindle. They all use the same distance of the belt to these rails, to everything else. So everything is cross compatible. And the other thing is also everything is very well documented. So that's a huge advantage for like trying to customize your machine and make it yours. Also stuff like the LCD case and all the connector parts, belt mounts, you're gonna find hundreds of variations of those on Thingiverse or UMatch. So if you want to add anything to your machine, you just print off your new parts, add the parts, and you're done. Stream fine for now. Thank you for that feedback. Can I talk about the E3D Titan? I can talk about extruder choices in general. Do I have a spare Titan somewhere? I do have one on the Mini, but that's not exactly a stock Titan. If I'd find my E3D box. Let me just give it another check. It should be down here somewhere. Ah, that's the one. There's the E3D box. So, essentially, shit, where's my Titan? I thought I had a Titan in here. That's the mouse. Essentially, the Titan is a super small geared extruder. I did make a review about it. If you want to watch that, go ahead. It's out there on YouTube. So if you want to hear my full thoughts on that, go ahead. But geared versus non-geared versus direct drive extruders. So like we have this super tiny, I actually do have a second camera. Hoo ha 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 ha. Shit. Geared versus direct drive versus any other approach of extruder essentially. So there's your little tiny geared direct drive extruder. Just has a motor and a gear, and then the idler lever which pushes the filament into the gear. Those work okay for 1.75 millimeter filament. They're totally fine for that. If you don't expect anything special from them. So the limitation you're going to get with those is you're not going to get the greatest resolution from just your filament feed, and you're also not going to get the super highest amount of torque. So like if you want to print fast, these are going to run into issues, and if you want to print super slow, these are also going to run into issues because the increments of how fine it can feed the filament, simply because of micro stepping typically not working that super great. A geared extruder is that actually, that's just a Titan box. There is no Titan in here. Yeah, that is something where a geared extruder, no matter whether it's a Titan or the Wade's extruder I just showed you a minute ago, these all give you more torque. This one with the big gears. These all give you more torque and a higher precision. However, the other limit you're running into is like how fast can your motor actually rotate before it runs out of torque. So, for example, for filament retracts, if you choose the gearing too high, that is going to suffer. So, extrusion speed is typically relatively slow, and then comes the retract. The faster you do that, the less stringy you're going to get. And that is going to be something at a certain point where you run into issues. However, like the 3-to-1 or 5 or 7-to-1 gearing ratios aren't really going to matter there. Also, like gearing, just the way your hobbed bolt is going to look, that is going to be something that determines how much torque your extruder can push before it starts to slip. This is just a gear, which is probably the worst option you could use. Again, it still works, but don't expect anything special from this sort of setup. That's just going to be something That's just going to be something specific to your exact 3D printer. Again, quality machines are going to have better profiles here that really dig into the filament, and cheaper machines are just going to use gears that slip much earlier. Inductive probe versus BL Touch versus optical. So the different ways auto bed leveling or auto mesh leveling or auto bed tramming compensation, whatever the name is you want to use, because all of them are wrong to a certain extent. You are going to need some sort of a probe, and I do actually have a few different ones here in some of the box downstairs. So you are typically going to use like an inductive probe, something like this, but much smaller. I think this is like a 20 or 40 millimeter sensing distance. So at this distance, it's actually going to trigger. This is one of the most insane ones I found on AliExpress. You're typically going to use a sensor like this, and it's actually not loose. So this is an inductive one, which senses metal or anything that is conductive, essentially. Is it? Does it work like that? I think it does, yeah. Anything that is conductive should be sensed by this probe. So there is a magnetic field that pulsates on the, in front of this sensor dome, essentially. And once you get anything that's conductive in there, like a piece of metal or the bed, it triggers, and it essentially, ferrous, not actually ferrous, aluminum works as well. As soon as you get anything that conducts and essentially disturbs that field, or that pulsating field, then it triggers and senses that. And typically you're supposed to use them like this, where something slides in front of them instead of them pushing into something, but it doesn't matter. That's inductive. Capacitive is the other option, that they look exactly the same. And capacitive essentially works like a capacitor, where it senses if you bring anything in front of the sensor, and it doesn't work just on metallic surfaces or conductive surfaces. And the other one is optical. Optical is typically based on reflection. So you've got one LED shining down onto the bed, and the other one picking up how much is being reflected from that. So the problem with capacitive ones is, again, I do have a capacitive one, or many capacitive ones. I do have several inductive ones. I do want to run a full test comparison rundown on them to actually see how much worth is to those stories. But typically what you're taught, like in engineering school, university more or less, is capacitive sensors are sensitive to everything. And that doesn't just include like your acrylic bed or your glass bed or your metallic bed, but also things as insignificant as the humidity in the air. So because those are like heavier particles that are in the air, or more capacitive particles that are in the air, that probe is going to sense those just the tiniest bit, and it's going to throw it off just modify, or it's going to mess with your sensing distance. That's the point. It's going to trigger at a different distance, and it's going to throw off your nozzle height calibration, essentially. So the idea is the inductive ones are the most robust ones. They're not the most precise ones, but they work well enough for like most applications. Capacitive ones, without further testing, wouldn't recommend. And the optical ones do work. However, with the optical ones, I'm always worried about them gunking up. If you look at, do I have any heavily used hot end? If you look at any hot end, or any, particularly like the fan shrouds on an E3D hot end, those degrade and get gunked up and like get stuff all over them. I think I do have like a heatsink here somewhere that's been used for like 50-ish kilograms of material. Yeah, this one is partially cleaned up already, but switch, there we go. So there is your heater block, and behind that, can I unscrew this? I cannot, probably. There we go. So if we unscrew the heatsink from the heat breaker, this was my first hot end that I bought. This is an E3D V4 in the 3mm version. It worked great. I already partially cleaned this up, but that is the area of that part I cleaned off. But that's just the heat sink right there. You can see how much gunk is on there. And you know, that gunk was everywhere on that tool head, so including the X carriage and you know, everywhere else. And I'd be worried if you'd have an optical sensor, this gunk I think would mess with it pretty badly. I already talked about the capacitive sensors, by the way, Moritz. Okay, yeah, that's my grief for the optical ones. However, more long-term testing needed. Which one was it that was using the exact same one? Yeah, I got one of those optical probes that was used in the E3D Big Box, the exact same type. I got that with the Duet Wi-Fi, so I'm going to be including that in the testing and comparison of these sensors if I ever get to doing those. Nilabine was asking about the multi-extrusion upgrade on the Mark II. Yes, I see your questions. It's just so much other stuff to talk about as well. And that sort of ties into single versus dual versus multi-extrusion. So there are a lot of 3D printers out there that do dual extrusion right now. The Ultimaker 3 obviously being one of them. The BCN 3D Sigma being like the other big name that is always being touted as like the king of dual extrusion. Prusa has released their own version of a dual extruder kit, or dual. It's actually a quad extruder kit, and essentially what it does is it channels 4 individual filaments into the same hot end. So you pull one out. Well, MK2 quad doesn't turn up quite the search results I was hoping for. There we go. Essentially it channels 4 filaments into the same tool head, into the same extruder, or hot end technically. And where can we see that in action? There we go. There's my OBS Studio. I can't see what I'm doing. There we go. So that's what it looks like, sort of. Yeah, you can do multicolored prints, and it's essentially 4 independent extruders that feed into a single hot end. Now the thing I'm sort of worried about this is you only have one hot end, and you know, mix and matching between materials is gonna be hard, simply because of the different temperatures that your materials might run at. Say support materials versus just support materials versus like your build materials. That might be something that is an issue. I think the hot end can cool down and heat up fast enough for the material switch to happen smoothly, but it's going to be something I'll have to try out myself to believe it, more or less. So that's one approach. The other is just having two independent hot ends on the same carriage, or the way the BCN 3D Sigma does it, with 2 independent carriages. So you've got your 2 hot ends. One moves to the side, parks, the other prints, the other moves to the side, and then you do the entire switcheroo. So sick phone, lol, what? So essentially essentially the idea is you have different materials, and I'm not too excited about like printing different colors. That might be more of a gimmick. Again, I'm not trying to diss whoever is really into multicolor printing, but I feel like printers that just do two colors of PLA, not only is the effort you need to create the print file for those, because you essentially need to model your part into 2 different sections. You need to split that up, whatever you're making, or you need to like design it for those 2 materials in the first place. That might be too much work for getting just a 2-color print, which is mechanically the same thing. It's just it just looks different. Versus where I really see dual extrusion shining is with soluble support material, whether that's PVA, whether that's the I think Ultimaker also just calls it PVA, E3D scaffold, anything like that that gives you, that extends your, how do I put this? That extends what you can do with your machines. Because if you have a support material, things like overhangs, things like weird geometries that have like negative overhangs with nothing supporting them, you don't need to peel out, grams of grams and cubic centimeter after cubic centimeter of same material, support material, which is impossible at times and also quite time consuming and frustrating. You just peel the biggest chunk of it off and throw it in a bucket of water and you're done with that. And that essentially, that closes the gap between SLS 3D printers and your classic filament based ones by an enormous amount. SLS, SLA to a lesser extent, they are doing dual extrusion pretty well too. So yeah, looks like we're agreeing here on support materials versus multicolors. Basically, yeah, I think that is the future. Just because I'm seeing them here, if you look at the video description, you can send me live tips that show up on stream. I think there should have been one that showed up, maybe if I didn't set it up to cover things. Anyways, Yuri Krushnil, shit. Thanks for the donation, 25 euros from Oregon, US, and 944 from Matt Johnson. Always appreciated. Thank you guys, you're awesome. Yeah, so if you want to send me tips or anything to maybe pay for better internet, I don't know. That's appreciated. Let's do a few more here. So the interesting question from Stalios Xerox in chat. Thomas, if you print a 270 degrees Celsius material, can you use a water-soluble material with it in the Mark II? Probably not. Probably not. The point is with PVA, it likes to degrade. If you leave it sitting in the hot end for too long, it just forms this chunk of material that is unextrudable that you have to physically clean out. So that moment when you pull out the old material, push the new one in, I don't think the hot end will cool down fast enough for PVA material not burning. Maybe with something like scaffold or a peelable support material, you might be on a better track there, but it might just be a bit too high of a gap there. Yeah. Okay, so let's go Bowden versus direct drive. Let's quickly address those. I feel like I've answered that on stream before, but because it fits in. So some of the options you're going to see with many 3D printers is just a Bowden system which has the extruder and the hot end decoupled from each other. So you've got this Teflon tube where essentially on the one side the extruder pushes material in, and on the other side it pushes it into the hot end. And what that allows you to do is have a lighter, there we go, a lighter carriage, a lighter motion system that doesn't have to lug around the extruder motor as well. And again, that lets you get away with weaker linear components with like a weaker drive system. The Fabricator Mini just uses these tiny NEMA 14 motors. Why work switchy? Switch? There we go. Okay, why did it focus so far forward? What the heck? It essentially just uses these tiny NEMA 14 motors. These, for comparison, this is a short NEMA 17, and that in here is the NEMA 14. It can get away with that because, first of all, it uses a gearing setup in here, essentially, that gears down that motor to, I think, 2-to-1 or something. Yeah, probably. And also because it doesn't have to lug around this extruder motor as well. Now, Bowden is always going to get you less of a print resolution versus direct drive, because just because of how the filament has to fit in the Bowden tube, of the extra length, of the extra play you have in here. And don't get me wrong, again, you can either way. The Ultimakers, including the Ultimaker 3, use Bowden setups and they print insanely well, but they're using all high-end components. So they're using Teflon tube that fits really well around the material. They're using good feeders. They're using good couplers. That is one of the most important things. They don't get like couplers here that are wobbling around and let you move the Bowden tube around too much. So either system can work. Bowden is easier to get those crisp, wobble-free and overshoot-free prints. However, I do typically prefer like the direct drive solution where you have the extruder motor directly above the hot end, just because it's a bit cleaner, it's a bit more direct, and it's also much better for flexibles. Like with the 1.75 millimeter Bowden setup, you're not going to be printing flexibles. Just completely forget about that. Right. Yeah, so some of the machines that I'm sort of excited about in the next few weeks, months, whatever it might be. So obviously the Prusa Mark II is for, by the way, Make Magazine also like designated it the best 3D printer of 2017. It's not even, 2016 isn't even over yet. What the heck? But like they're saying this is the best 3D printer of 2017, which I agree with. But it's for a specific audience. The Mark II is great for makers, for DIYers. I wouldn't really recommend this in like a super professional environment, though it does have the potential of being an absolute workhorse. And it's great to tinker with, but it's also just a great machine that sort of works. The other machine that I'm really excited about is the Ultimaker 3, not because it's just another Ultimaker, but because they're doing dual extrusion, and I want to see how well they are doing dual extrusion, which is, again, probably the direction most manufacturers and most 3D printers are going to head, and it makes sense. I'm excited about that trend of doing dual extrusion, doing soluble supports, doing more functional prints. Also, that other trend, which we have in the Markforged, which we sort of have in the AO Zeus, and we also have in the Printabot Simple, in the new Printabot Simple, just the 2016 edition. I don't know what it's exactly called, but they are doing really cool things with just these small ESP Wi-Fi chips, and then doing cloud-based slicing and cloud-based machine management. That is, it doesn't make your 3D prints any better, but it makes your 3D printer so much more usable and so much more accessible if you don't have to like deal with SD cards or USB hosts or stuff like that. It just takes your entire 3D printer control into the cloud. It takes your management into the cloud. It's something I really enjoy, because like the time when I was using Octoprint more intensively, because I had one printer that was doing all the work, I really do have to set up another Raspberry Pi with Octoprint. At that time, I was just printing so much. I was firing up CAD software, just quickly designing something, sending it down with the send to Octoprint option Slick3R, and it came out perfect every time. And if the Printabot Play has the option to like do the same thing out of the box, then I'm really excited for that. I really do want to see what they, and especially how they implement it and how well it works. Right, one more. Let's do one more topic. So I think I have the little baggie upstairs. So nozzle sizes, that's what's being asked about. Nozzle sizes and is this the, no, that's a standard 0.4. And the perceived repeatability and accuracy and layer height and whatever else a 3D printer manufacturer might put on the spec sheet. So some manufacturers just claim like 0.005 millimeter layer height, minimum layer height. Some claim like 0.0125 millimeter positioning accuracy. And those numbers don't matter. Let's face it, it completely doesn't matter. A printer that does 5 micron layers is not going to print any better than one that does 100 micron layers on the spec sheet advertised. Those are just numbers that the manufacturer can basically make up. So a minimum layer height is not something that is going to physically limit you in like the layer height you can print with the machine. It's there is literally no difference between an i3, or practically no difference in a machine or an i3 that does 5 or is advertised as 5 micron layers versus one that is advertised as 50 micron layers. It just don't matter. The part that matters is how well your machine is built, and that's not something that you can work out theoretically with like the theoretical resolution of your spindles or your belts or anything like that. That's going to be something that you have to empirically work out and see how well it does it at those different layer heights. Something like MakerBot. I don't know what MakerBot advertised, but if they tell you, okay, 50 micron is our print resolution, that is just the default setting for the slicer. You can print higher and you can print lower. If you print... My stream is dying. Hold on. My stream died. I'm hoping my stream did not die. Lost in legs. Let's repeat that. No audio. So what was I saying when it cut out? I'm looking at the YouTube stream and it's like, oh yeah, it's freezing up. Okay, I see what you guys mean. It's like skipping a record. OBS. I should look into something other than OBS. Maybe. Okay. It looks like we're back. No, is it? YouTube is still lagging out for me. Okay, looks like we're good now. I was talking about layer heights. I don't know how much got through of that. So the layer height, the default layer height that your manufacturer advertises is just going to be some default they set in the slicer. So if a machine is advertised with like 50 micron layer height, minimum layer height or something, or 5 micron layer height, that might just be a default that they set at some point. It doesn't necessarily mean that the printer can print well at that resolution or at that layer height. It's not a resolution essentially. And it also doesn't mean that it doesn't go the other way and it can print better at, or it can still print good at lower layer heights. So the slowly before you end. So that spec sheet number essentially means nothing. It's more about how well the printer is built, how well your kinematics platform is going to hold up at those layer heights, and yeah, that's that. Now the other part that plays into that is nozzle size. The default nozzle size these days is 0.4 or 0.35 millimeters, which is serviceable, which is a good compromise between print speed and the sort of detail reproduction you can get with that nozzle. You can go finer than that, you can go coarser than that, you can put something, if you have the E3D V6 in here, you can put something like a Volcano on there. You can get those big 1.2 millimeter layers and those fat 1.5 millimeter extrusion widths. Totally possible. It's going to make your print super fast if your extruder can keep up. But it's also, of course, going to lose you lots of details. It's a good approach. It's something that has its application, definitely. And the other way is going with smaller nozzles. Like I have some 0.15 millimeter nozzles from E3D here right now, regular brass nozzles, and you can barely see the hole in them. If you look into my E3D portrait video, which was released last Tuesday, I think, you can see some of the parts they were printing with that nozzle size, and to be honest, they look absolutely incredible. It doesn't come out that well in the video because I was zoomed in on them so far, but the objects you see are like that tall, and they look like they're like 20 or 30 centimeter tall FDM objects. You sort of get the sense of a scale when I think it was Sanjay put his finger next to one. There's also a ruler in the back. That should give you some sort of scale there. It's crazy. It's amazing. However, the one big downside with these super tiny nozzles is you need good materials. They actually handed me a sample of MG4094 ABS, which is a high flow ABS. And it's just like a 30 centimeter sample. They were like, yeah, that's going to be enough for many prints because you don't use any material. But the smaller your nozzle gets, the better and the flow happier your material will need to be for it to work at all. So like a reasonable minimum would be like a 0.25 millimeter nozzle where you can still reasonably use most materials with. Yeah, typically if you change your nozzle height, or if you get a printer with a smaller nozzle height, you are going to have to, factor in that it's also going to be using smaller layers, or thinner layers to an effect, and that is going to up print speed considerably. Yeah, so again, 0.4 is a good compromise there. Now, maybe touching on print speed and on advertised print speed again. And the one thing I typically, point out with print speeds, and especially like the up to 200 millimeters a second print speed or something like that, is print speed doesn't matter. For most users, for like 95% of the users out there, print speed does not matter, because let's be honest, how much of the time are our 3D printers idle, and how much of the time are they actually printing? If that time factor is less than like 90%, if you're using them less than 90% or have them running less than 90% of the time, you're probably printing too fast. The point is, up to a print speed of like 30 millimeters a second, you are going to see better print results pretty much universally. That is why the Mark II uses such low print speeds by default, such comparatively low print speeds. That's why the Play prints so slowly, if you just look at the raw numbers. However, the point is, the slower you print, up to like a certain minimum, of course, the slower you print, the more reliable your prints are going to come out. The better your prints are going to come out. The more detailed your prints are going to turn out. And that is something that I will always prefer over, for most models. Of course, there are parts where it doesn't matter. But that's something I am always going to prefer versus, just throwing a part out there and just smashing it and then ending up with something that sort of resembles your original design but doesn't fit mechanically, has like artifacts on there, has details lost and that sort of stuff, or might not print at all because it gets knocked over, or layers don't bond, or other stuff that could just affect your print. So if you see a printer that is advertised with, I think 200 millimeters a second, that was the One Pro, the One Pro's advertised speed, as well as Deltas. Deltas are always advertised for higher speeds, but at a certain point, your hot end, your extruder, and your kinematics platform are just going to give up. Not give up, but crap out. Where the issues you're seeing from those is going to nullify the advantages you get from just having the faster speed, where you need to reprint things, where you need to tune in your settings so super precisely that you're not going to end up with good prints if you don't. Faster prints are more energy efficient. Whatever. Yeah. Also something. One last note of cheap versus Joe, we already talked about geared extruders. One last thing I want to touch on that same topic of having a reliable machine versus a fast machine. It's sort of the same thing with expensive versus cheap printers. If you get a decent 3D printer, I don't want to say like a super high-end one, just if you get a decent 3D printer, you're going to have that that confidence of, okay, I can just start a print and I know how it's going to come out. I know how it's going to print. I know the print is not going to, set on fire by itself. I know it's not going to like have stuff detaching from the build plate and clog up the entire hot end. That's the reason why I dismantled the Malian M150 that I reviewed. It didn't have the safety features that would, or it didn't have it enabled. I could have enabled them, yes, sure. But it didn't have those safety features that would enable the printer from burning itself to the ground, enabled by default. Also, it had some really shoddy wire connections and some unsupported stuff there that would have broken, over time, and just, wire burns and stuff. Not cool, not cool. But that's just something you're gonna get with the cheaper no-name machines that don't have a proper engineering team behind them. If you look at a proper 3D printer, the Lowspot Mini uses drag chains, Egus drag chains, plus I think even the proper cables for them. The Mark II has, these wire spirals with a nylon support inside. That's perfect. The printable plate at least has them sleeved and properly routed. So that's something that just makes these machines so much more reliable, and gives you that peace of mind to just start them, have them do their thing, go to bed, do whatever. Always have a smoke detector in the same room, obviously, but just that peace of mind for me personally would be worth a whole lot. Right, I think I just clipped. Yeah. Those were always the machines that I enjoyed the most. The ones that you could just, plug in, slice your files, know exactly how things come out, and just rely on it. I think that's what's worth, for me at least, the most in a 3D printer. And with those words, I think we've got I think we've got a good conclusion for this live stream. I don't know, guys. Let me know how you guys liked it. It's we didn't have an unboxing today. We didn't have like a huge conversion, but we still did 1.5 hours of I think sort of constructive dialogue, more or less. Someone printed a Benchy in the meantime. That's awesome. Yeah, and I'm hoping if you watched this live or if you watched the recording, you did find it helpful. That would be great. Obviously, this is going to be, the recording is not going to go up just from the stream. I'm going to have to edit that and re-upload it because it cut out a few times. I do apologize for that. I will need to look into why that's happening. But anyways, yeah, if you enjoyed it, giving it a thumbs up doesn't matter because the video is going to go offline anyways. But let me know in chat. That's always appreciated. And as always, thanks for being here, and I will see you all in the next one. Again, hope it was helpful for you. See ya!